Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
My friend in this story I am still friends with to this day. He grew up in the mountains living off the land in Grayson County, Virginia. He and his family are recognized as members of the Pamunkey Native American nation. Once I had a not deer encounter in the woods in his backyard. He explained to me it was the manifestation of a forest spirit similar to what Slavs call a leshy. It's amazing the things this man knows about. Really, he is just a wealth of knowledge and a great human being. So we were working construction on the outskirts of Harrisonburg, Virginia, Shenandoah Valley. When the weekend came, we decided to go stop by his cousin Lee's land way out in the mountains, several winding dirt roads off Highway 33. Now let me tell you, Cousin Lee's got an old school mountain cabin still heated by a wood-burning stove. Also, Cousin Lee's very simple, as a result of a childhood head trauma. He is by no means dumb, just like Sling Blade simple. So we're over there having a good time, grilling some deer he shot on the side of the mountain, and I noticed padlocks on what appeared to be refuse bins. Of course, I inquired, and the response I got was,
"Them freaks will dig in my trash and throw stuff everywhere if I don't lock it."
Cousin Lee burned what he could and took the remains to the dump, a very common practice in the area. So, I am assuming he is talking about raccoons, and the man is simple, so he is being overdramatic. We went in to eat, and no one put the lock back on the refuse bin, which had the remainder of the deer carcass in it. Dinner goes by without a hitch, and after cleaning up we decided to sit down and smoke some mountain grass. We're smoking out, no alcohol, having a good old time playing old records of bands like Led Zeppelin, etc. When all of a sudden we heard a loud thud on the roof, followed by 2 quick steps and then silence. I have no idea what just happened. I just know I am scared. Cousin Lee exclaims,
"It's them. They better not be in my trash."
And goes into his room and comes out with a shotgun. My friend, we will call him Jay, grabs these 2 handcrafted walking sticks out the corner. I am still oblivious, but my friend Jay and his cousin Lee are headed to the back door like this is some routine. I then witness Jay bust out the door first with the 2 big sticks, waving them in the air while making just strange growl-like noises. After Jay gets about 10 feet out the door, out comes Lee with the shotgun, but he is waving it above his head, making the same crazy growling noise. At this point I am just too curious about the situation and head for the door. When I got to the door, the pungent odor of bear feces. I poke my head out of the door and I see this hairy man dressed in tattered rags and caked with mud trying to gather the deer parts from the refuse bin. I look up and there is another one on top of the shed, but he is perched almost like a gargoyle, wearing only what appeared to be a tattered vest. I'm drowning in awe of the situation. My mind is unable to fully process what is going on, and I let out a scream. This seemed to upset the trash digger, and he started banging a piece of deer he had in his hand on the side of the refuse bin. Cousin Lee took the shotgun down and fired off a shot, and they took off. What was really horrifying was apparently there was one on the roof behind all of our backs. I saw it coming overhead and it landed on the shed the other one was on, and then in a single bound leaped into a tree. He successfully ran off with a piece of deer too. Now here comes the real crazy part, the explanation. Cousin Lee says,
"You never want to shoot one. They have a mighty big clan and they will come if you get one of their own. Warning shot always scares him off."
I just burst out, "What was that?" The response I got was the tree people. Apparently people have gone into the forest and lived and survived and ended up clanning up with others living in the woods. This has been going on for a long time. They have lived for several generations in the wilderness as feral people. Apparently they steal clothing off the line, tools, anything they can get their hands on, and they also enjoy messing with people. Oh, and apparently they live in the trees, thus why are they called locally as the tree people?
I live in West Virginia and have all my life. I don't come from a rich family and I am not rich myself. I live in a small single-wide trailer with my 2-year-old son outside of the town of Gary in McDowell County. My boyfriend is a truck driver and is only home every so often. I'm kind of used to being alone with my son here at night. My closest neighbor is 3 miles away, and my trailer is back in the woods. This is a mountain town. I grew up hearing scary stories of monsters, but I never saw anything growing up. I never saw anything until now, and I want to tell you about it. What people are talking about is most definitely what is stalking us here, because I know it's not a Sasquatch. I never saw a Sasquatch, but I think I would know if I ever saw one. So, this just started last summer. I clean houses for a living and I was leaving the last house of the day, and had just gone to pick up my son from the babysitters, and we headed back home. It was 8 exactly when we turned in the driveway. My driveway is a very long sand driveway surrounded by trees, and the woods on both sides. I hadn't even got to my house when I saw a man jump from one tree on the right side of the driveway to a tree to the left side of the driveway. I mean like 30 feet in the air. He just jumped like how a monkey swings from trees. He did this in front of the car as I was still driving slow to get to the trailer. It's bumpy sand on the driveway, so I never go more than 10 miles per hour down it. At that moment, I wasn't sure what I saw, but I did know it was a man. I saw its skin and it had some torn cloth on him too. Arms, legs, all of that a man would have. Did not see its face. I hit my brakes. My son is still in the back seat, almost asleep. I didn't question what I saw or try to make sense of it because I know it was some creature. Yes, I was scared. My first thought was my son. I only stopped there in my driveway for a second, and then I went ahead and sped up to go on and get down the driveway so I could get in the house with my son. I'm passing those trees to my left and I'm just looking around to see if it's there. I don't see anything. I just keep on going. It's about dark, but I can still see. I see my trailer around the corner up ahead and I see movement. Okay, so let me add here that it's not that uncommon for some deer or other animals to be around the trailer. That's normal. But there were people up ahead and one of them was in my trash bag. I don't have trash service way out here, so I sometimes will sit a bag of trash on my porch and haul it myself to the dump. So a man was all in my trash. I get closer and these people hear my car and my headlights are lighting up the front area of my house. And I see like 4 of these things run off into the woods. I saw one of them really well. But it was his face that really got me scared. That thing had dirt or mud all over his face, and there was something wrong with his face because it didn't look right to me. His eyes were way up on his forehead and it had this humpback. It had some dark pants on but no shirt, and the chest and back had a lot of brown hair. He was barefoot. This was the one digging in my trash bag. He ran off too, but he didn't seem to be in such a rush as the other ones were to get back in the woods. I lost sight of them all and I waited before I went any farther because of my son. I didn't have a gun or anything on me, so I was careful. I sat in my car for 20 minutes running idle before I drove on up to the house. I grabbed my son and we ran inside, and because of no cell signal down my driveway, I called my uncle once I got inside. My uncle said I was seeing things, but he came on out there an hour later and looked around. Lord, I was so scared while me and my son sat here waiting for my uncle. My uncle got here. He's a big guy and had weapons on him. He investigated. He came back in the front door white as a ghost. He came in and said he had seen the devil in those woods and that we were getting in his truck with my son and we're getting the hell out of here. We never called the police or nothing. What were we going to tell the police? That was last summer. The winter came and nothing. Then just this past March, when my boyfriend was home, we heard scratching at 11 at night on the side of the trailer. A metal sound. He went outside to look, but there wasn't anything there. But he smelled an odor that he described as rotten pig feet. If you eat pig feet, then you know what I mean. We smell bad things a lot and we see things moving in the trees. But now my boyfriend will be moving us to another state because of his job, and we only have a few more weeks here, but there are some wild clans in the West Virginia mountains.
I live in Colorado and like to spend my weekends in the mountains, fly fishing, hiking, camping, etc. I'm in my early 20s, so young I suppose, but I like to think I'm generally comfortable in the mountains and I've seen quite a bit of what this state has to offer. My older brother is like me but even more experienced in the mountain wilderness, and yesterday he and I decided to go fishing at a favorite hole of ours in the Holy Cross Wilderness. This area is fairly well trafficked, especially now as the aspens are changing and lots of tourists come to see them. Bluebird skies, warmish weather, and he and I were just getting in the water when I first felt something was off. It's late morning at this point. Most people like to fish early in the morning, but this hole is blocked from the sun by a cliff face and the fish don't usually start biting until closer to noon. Again, this is a favorite hole of ours, because despite the area having lots of hikers and day trippers, this part of the creek we're on takes some know-how and effort to hike to. So we're about half a mile away from where we park and no one else is around. First thing I notice is very little wildlife ambience background noise after we set up our rods and get in the water. As I'm wading in, I hear rocks above us on the cliff move and a couple fall into the water no more than 50 feet from us. That's odd. In my probably 15 or 20 times at this spot, never have I witnessed the cliff fall apart as it appeared to have done. Beside the sound of the creek we're standing in, it's deathly quiet, and the sound of the rocks falling and hitting the water made us both leap. My brother turns around and we both look at the cliff face. There's a ledge above with trees and I had never given it any thought before, but I realized then and there I felt like someone not only could be up on that ledge, but my gut tells me there is. My brother, I can tell, seemed to be contemplating things too. He literally turned to me a minute after the rock fall, and said, "Okay, that was weird, right?" I told him yeah, and then I hesitantly told him, "Hey, it's quiet out today." Almost on cue, a rock lands in the water, this time in between us. I'm not kidding, we're near this cliff face, but not near it enough for a rock to just fall off and land between us. No, this rock had to have been propelled. We looked up and we saw it. A person, holding a rock in their hand, naked as all get out with long brown hair. And as we're looking at him it looks like he grinned and threw the rock at us from above. It got close to hitting my brother and immediately we're yelling WTF and quickly wading back to the other side of the creek. My brother slipped and the person must have thrown another rock at him because I heard a big kerplunk and my brother is yelling bloody murder. I got on the bank and grabbed a rock in my hand and turned to throw back at the person on the cliff. They're no longer there. Keeping my eyes on the cliff ledge, I offer my hand to my brother as he's now soaked and pull him up onto the bank. He's pissed, saying he'll get his gun from the car and shoot the man and saying he could have been killed. Now we're both on the bank looking up and expecting rocks to come flying and sure enough, they do. But we can't see who's throwing them, but they're golf balls to football-sized rocks being tossed down one at a time. From memory I count a total of 7 rocks thrown at us after the initial rock slide. My brother throws a rock over the ledge, but I tell him we should move. We weave through the river willows, looking back over the foliage to keep an eye on the ledge, and then we hear it, a howl/blood-curdling scream from that direction. I don't see the being, but it had to have been making that noise. We got back to the car and both started recollecting what we both experienced. We both figured it must have been some deranged homeless person or something, but it's not until I told my GF when we got home last night that she told me about the feral people she hears about on TikTok. I guess homeless psychos are the same thing as these feral people, right? Or is there a distinct difference? Neither of us were hit by the rocks, although my brother says the one that I didn't see land was so close it splashed him and is why he fell in the water. I should note we drove to the National Park Ranger office and filed a report under my brother's name. He was told he'd be given a call today or early this week with any follow-up or questions they may need answered. Craziest thing I've ever experienced while out in the mountains. We're both already saying we may never go back to that hole again, and I already told a couple buddies of mine that know the spot about what happened there.
When I was around 12, my family and I moved out to the middle of some abandoned strip mines in rural Alabama. It was awesome. Going swimming in quarries, lots of abandoned equipment and cliff faces to climb, caves, and miles of trails. Abandoned dirt roads used by the mines to explore. The trade-off was there were a lot of venomous snakes, and at night it was dark. No streetlights, just the occasional porch light maybe every mile or so on the main road. One day in particular, my friend P and I were out on one of the dirt roads that went off to the side of the main mine road. We hadn't been down that road before. It was like 10 a.m. on a bright summer day and we figured why not. We had gone maybe a mile down that road and came to a left-hand turn. Beside that left turn, and alongside the road we were walking on, was a small lake. We walked up to the lake and were watching small frogs and a turtle swimming around when I caught movement across the lake. I saw a man walking away from us, heading up the hill. I poked P and pointed. "Who is that? Why is he out here?" We were miles into the mines. No people anywhere. No houses nearby. We both stood up, and as soon we got right on our feet, he stopped walking. In a split second, he spun around and came running in our direction. We bolted. Ran. Like Gump. I looked back and he was running faster than any human I'd ever seen. He covered the distance. He had to run down the hill and around the lake to get close to us. That road was easily 300 yards in seconds. He grabbed me and we jumped off the road and into a ditch behind some bushes. I peeked out and he was maybe 30 or 40 feet from us, spinning around in the road, making this god-awful grunting sound. And weirdly enough, I swear he had an entire cooked chicken in his hand. He was wearing desiccated overalls, dirty boots, and he had what I can only describe as a Cro-Magnon brow. Huge. My memory might not be super accurate given how long it's been, but it seemed like his forehead stuck out a good 4 feet over his eyes. It was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. He spun around in the road and started running back the way he came. We stayed there, in that ditch, for almost an hour, afraid to move. Listening, watching in case he was hiding and waiting. We crawled along the roadside, all the way back to the main road. From there we walked, but stayed in the tree line until we saw the main paved road, and then we ran. We ran all the way back home. Got home, told our fathers, and both of our fathers and P's older brothers loaded up and went looking for him, but never found a thing. All these years later, and it still haunts me. My girlfriend recently took me out to her grandmother's house to meet and spend time with her family. And where does dear old Granny live? Right on the edge of those same strip mines. I told her the story, and she looked really serious and said,
Y'all are lucky. There's all kinds of bad things that happen in those mines.
So yeah, every visit to Grandma means the Glock and the 12-gauge ride with us. Anyway, that's my creepy encounter story. I forgot about this. Recently, my dad reminded me of something. I had gotten beaten up really badly on my last day of summer school. So to make me feel better and for passing summer school, my parents bought me a Kawasaki motocross bike. My dad had an old Honda racing bike, so we tried to ride out there any chance we got. One day we're out, deep in the mines, and I saw a wooden crate box off the road in the bushes. Looked about 6 feet long, maybe 18 feet high. Me, being a nosy kid, walked over and looked inside. There was a ton of hay, a blanket, and an old pillow. I called Dad over and showed him. I remember he looked around and said if someone's living that way out here, they don't want to be found or bothered. Let's go home. We hopped on the bikes, rode home, no problems at all. But the weird thing is, my dad sat out on the porch with the light off most of the night, just staring at the edge of the woods. Never said why, and I cannot believe I never put the two incidents together. But now I think I know. But apparently, he never saw anything or anyone, because he came in late that night, went to bed, and never sat out there again.
I received a private message from a very nice gentleman over in Tennessee who shared his story with me about his experiences with the Hillbillies. He did not want to share it from his profile publicly in a sub, but he did give me permission to share it. I'll refer to him as Mike. Mike lives near Irwin, Tennessee, Unicoi County, along with his wife and their dog. Mike and his wife have had 2 encounters with the feral wild men. One encounter as recent as last week, April 2021. Mike said the first encounter was back in June of 2019 when he and his wife were both in their living room together watching TV around 8 p.m. They both were startled when they saw a deformed man's face appear in the window. Mike's wife literally yelled out in fright. It stared at them and gave an evil smile and ran off into the woods. They did call the police. Police searched the yard and tree line but found nothing. By 11 p.m., while in bed, Mike and his wife, who couldn't sleep and had the gun nearby, heard disturbing laughter from outside the window. The laugh was a lunatic type of laugh. Mike took his gun and went to the door and out to his porch where he yelled, "Get the hell out of here," and shot 2 rounds into the ground. Mike saw not one, but 2 wild men run from behind his shed and into the woods. Mike was so disturbed at the sight of them that he shut and locked the door. He returned to bed with his wife, but they both did not go to sleep. The following morning, Mike's wife routinely lets their dog outside. The dog will do her business, then will always return to the front door and scratch to be let back in. The dog has not been seen again since his wife let her outside that morning. Last week, Mike's wife had a sighting. She was returning home from the supermarket and was unloading groceries from her truck when something up in the trees grabs her attention. She saw a deformed man up in a tree staring at her and grinning widely. She got back in her truck and left and drove to her husband's office. They both do not know what to do because the police are finding nothing and they feel like they are not being taken seriously by law enforcement. Mike did install several security cameras. Mike's description of the wild men: taller than 6 feet, thin but toned body, long dark hair on their heads with patches of hair throughout their bodies, pale gray skin, long fingernails, only one tooth is in its mouth, eyes are large and wide and are black, looks like a man, Bigfoot, troll mix, deformed features in the face and head. Mike promises to keep us updated. Update: Mike did locate the dog about 0.8 of a mile into the woods, dead. The dog was not in a great condition, and I will not go into those details here, but the fur color was how he recognized the dog. To be conservative, there was not much left but fur and bones. The wife does believe a feral wild man is responsible. Mike and his wife continue to have sightings, but mostly up in the trees. They have excluded the police because the police never find anything and have told Mike and his wife that they are most likely seeing campers throughout the woods. His wife stated that she is aware of times when the feral wild men are near because of an odor, a very distinct odor. The wife seems to be having more sightings than her husband. They believe the feral wild men are more interested in the wife. They have had one additional scare of something peeking through their window and described the face looking like a very evil Smeagol from Lord of the Rings, describing the hit and miss strings of long hair on its almost bare scalp. They have both heard the lunatic type of laughing in the woods at night. It is not an everyday occurrence, but they are afraid. They are mindful and careful. Mike says it's one of those things where you try to live with it but stay out of the woods and stay armed, just in case. The wife is sure these are feral wild men and not Bigfoot and not campers just messing with them. They have some pictures and I am waiting for Mike to send those over. He has asked me if I am willing to make the trip his way to take a look and I am debating. This is the only active case I am aware of now regarding the feral wild men, so I want to stay on top of this. Waiting for Mike to send me more.
I used to live in western Washington state. It is very woodsy. There is this one stretch of road deep in the Olympic National Forest. It goes around a bend and then you see up two mountainsides packed with trees. On one side we got out and parked and took a driving break. We walked a bit into the woods. So, I have a strong sixth sense. Had it since I was a kid. I also have an irrational fear of inbred mountain men, all of the original Wrong Turn, The Hills Have Eyes, etc. We found a roundish clearing maybe 100 yards on the tree line. We played for a bit, then I was going to sneak around the back of a tree in the clearing. On the opposite side of this tree was a symbol, not one I recognized. Thought it was a kid possibly, years ago. But I started looking at the other trees and they had marks as well. I started to feel a deep fear and a sense that we needed to leave. I'm lucky that my family and friends trust my judgment. But, we had a lot of pushback from my younger brother. He dragged his feet and I was ushering us all back to the car. He's halfway between the clearing and the car. I was not watching him. I hear running and he's booking it to the car, screaming go go. He jumps in and we take off. I look out the rear view to see two scrawny men come out of the woods. They looked dirty and like their faces were crooked. I have driven by that spot 2 more times in later years and never had the inclination to stop again.
2 of my friends had relatives that had gone off to live in the bush, Queensland, and were rarely heard from again after that. They weren't feral though. They'd come into town every once in a while for staples, but you would go years without seeing or hearing from them. It was more or less a full, off-the-grid existence. You'd occasionally come across those kinds of camps and cabins if you were bushwhacking. Because it was just kind of accepted that those guys were around, we weren't really afraid when we'd come across a cabin, but we also weren't going to go knock on their door and ask for tea either. I generally gave them a wide berth. It takes an enormous amount of grit to thrive deep in the woods like that, and I was definitely weary of getting in their space.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.